Welcome everybody to our discussion tonight, brought to you by Real Action Community Engagement. Today we're going to be talking about autism acceptance in recognition of Autism Acceptance Month, which was this April. Today I have with me Jim Powell, who I'll let him introduce himself, but ironically is my cousin, and we will be talking a little bit about some issues surrounding autism and autism acceptance. Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, man. Thanks for having me first off. And yeah, I'm Jim, and I work for a company called BlueSprig. We're an ABA provider, which is behavioral therapy for children with autism. And I've worked in various roles in the ABA world for about the last 11 years or so. So yeah, I've been around various individuals with autism for about that time.
Okay, cool. Thank you for being here. Thank you for agreeing to talk.
Of course.
I know that we got a few questions from people in the community, and you know, we're hoping that we can just kind of answer some of those things. You know, obviously we're never going to be able to answer everything, but you know, whatever we can kind of talk about today, I think the goal is really to get people interested and to get people to ask questions, so that they can, you know, further educate themselves. So that's kind of what we're hoping to accomplish, and we'll see what kind of stuff we can cover. So I think the first thing is probably good to kind of start with a baseline. So what exactly is autism? So if somebody says autism or autism spectrum or something like that, what exactly are they talking about?
Well, generally, you know, autism is going to be, I guess, characterized by a handful of different traits that typically are going to be shown. Now, before I start getting into a lot of that, let me take half a step back and just mention about the spectrum aspect of things. As far as the reason it's Autism Spectrum Disorder is because a lot of these different characteristics and things present themselves with various severity and in different types and shapes along the way. But oftentimes it's going to be in areas of social difficulties or just social engagement difficulties, some language and communication barriers, as well as some repetitive and or restrictive behaviors that can occur a lot of times.
Okay, so you mentioned that a lot of it impacts people's ability to kind of interact socially, or to kind of you said restrictive behaviors. What kind of restrictive behaviors?
Well, sometimes we see some repetitive behaviors. So, you know, as opposed to, you know, responding to a question or responding to a situation when an individual is interacting with somebody, they may resort to scripting, you know, various movie lines or song lyrics or certain, again, even if it's not from necessarily a movie, just some certain, you know, I guess, set of lines, responses that they have that they'll do. Some individuals also, as far as the restrictive end of things, have difficulties reading social cues, you know, from other people, as far as reading body language, reading facial expressions, being able to understand idioms and things like that, that can kind of really restrict some of that communication and social interaction.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I think, you know, you hit on that spectrum aspect of it. So, you know, there might be people who struggle with more of those characteristics, and there might be some where you may not even notice it in casual conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing to remember, you know, with like this official diagnosis, or, you know, just even when people are casually saying, you know, I am autistic, or, you know, I have autism. It may not be something that is so obvious to kind of the casual observer. But yeah, you know, at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's not still a struggle for somebody.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you mentioned some of those characteristics, and then you also mentioned, you know, where you work, you do ABA. Is that right?
Yep. So, Applied Behavior Analysis, it stands for.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about some of like the strategies or the like techniques that exist to kind of help people who are dealing with this?
Well, what we do, at least in our approach, is you know, all of our strategies and our programming and kind of techniques and things that we're going to work on with our kids is really going to be based on the individual's needs. So, you know, the biggest kind of cornerstone to success is, you know, first assessing where somebody is at on, you know, their personal journey. But then also it's a lot of interaction with the families as well to kind of figure out what's their family plan. You know, what are some potential cultural considerations we need to keep into mind. So it's a very collaborative approach. And not only are we working very closely with the families and the children, but, you know, we're also very much working with, you know, speech providers, doctors, pediatricians, school systems, you know, if children are on IEPs and things like that. But we really want to take a very kind of robust approach to things. And then from there, we develop different strategies. First, we identify those areas that we're going to kind of work on, you know, whether it be social programs that we might help the child to interact with others in a better way, or, you know, some communication barriers. Some of the kids that we do work with that are younger, we, you know, don't have verbal skills. So we have to kind of either help them develop that in conjunction with some speech therapists, or, you know, by helping them use alternative forms of communication, some augmentative communication devices. You know, the iPads and tablets right now are fantastic for that, because you can literally take a picture of anything, put a label to it, and then, you know, you walk up and meet somebody new and, hey, here's a picture of Jim. This is Jim now. And it's actually a picture of me, not just a picture of a random guy with a beard.
Cool.
So once you develop kind of all of those approaches and things that we're going to target and work on, what areas we want to help, then it's a matter of, again, figuring out what's a good learning style for the individual. So an individualistic approach is really key here, to make sure that, you know, we're taking all those things into account and what that personal individual wants to achieve themselves. We work with children from ages 1.5, and I've worked with individuals up into their 50s as well. And so, again, depending on where they're at, you know, if they can verbalize, you know, things that they want us to help them with, then we will. So it's a kind of tough question to answer, and just we work on B and C, because we work on pretty much A to Z, everything in between, and then the things outside of the normal alphabet, if you will. So,
Right.
yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool. I mean, I think that's, you know, what you said about it being kind of an individualized approach that really takes into account the person's unique needs, you know, and not trying to cookie cutter kind of, you know, put people into a placement or a kind of program that may not be beneficial for them. And I guess that makes sense a lot with, you know, the notion of the spectrum. So one person might need more intensive strategies, where another person might just need a little bit of help gathering some resources that they themselves can use.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we worked with folks, you know, I've worked with some adults, you know, who are just needing some skills on being able to, you know, kind of keep their workday in line for, you know, their work and end of things, to make them more productive in their day and keep them, you know, employed in a very, you know, I guess rewarding way for themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting how you can apply this particular approach, ABA, to anything, because if you think about it, everybody has behaviors, right? So it's a matter of modifying behavior and doing that in a way that's going to be beneficial and meaningful to that individual.
Right. And yeah, and I think that, you know, in preparation for doing this, you know, I looked up a lot, and I think that, and I want to talk a little bit about some of this in the next set of questions that I had for you. But, you know, there are differing opinions on, you know, treatments that work, or I like, you know, to think of it more as like strategies, because, like, you know, one strategy is not going to fit a certain individual, whereas, you know, it might be incredibly beneficial to somebody else. And I think that kind of open mentality, that there isn't necessarily something to fix here. It's, how do I help the individual be where they want to be? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that, go ahead.
No, you're all right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know a lot of the like the articles and kind of like the community out there, they talk about really like these strength-based approaches to strategies, to treatment, to programs, and all that kind of stuff, is like capitalize on the person's strengths, capitalize on what they're good at, and you know, then you can kind of meet them where they're at, rather than forcing them into kind of where society might think they need to be or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And and a lot of times you see a lot of different opinions out there because there are bad experiences in
Sure.
different things. And like you said, there's different approaches to anything out there, whether it's ABA or whether it's LASIK surgery or
Right.
again, where you're going to go get
Yeah.
a haircut, kind of deal, right? So and so but regardless, so all about having those good experiences and finding places and doing research and finding out what are priorities and what is kind of coming out. So it's about not jumping in and saying, well, I need ABA, so this is ABA, or I need a haircut, so I'm going to go down to whoever down the road. It's a matter of, all right, let me see who follows up, ask questions, meet the team, do some research online, find out what people's bad experiences are. I hate that people have had bad experiences, but I love when they put it out there so that way other people can learn and they know, and it helps educate people to ask the right questions when they're going out looking for things. But again, it's very much like you said, where it's a matter of what do we need to do to help that individual, not help the autism.
Right. Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I wanted to, and we kind of talked about this, before, we were talking tonight in preparation for this, but there's been a lot of language changes that have happened. It's not a new thing by any means, but language is constantly evolving, and it seems like in kind of the autism community there are some maybe preferences towards certain language versus it almost seemed like there might be kind of a split between people that are autistic and their caretakers almost. And I did some brief research and looked up a few articles from kind of the autism community, and it is interesting to kind of see that shift from trying to make this person a functioning aspect of society the way I see it, compared to kind of looking at what that person wants and trying to come from their needs rather than my own. And I think that it's really important for us to recognize that you and I are two individuals that aren't personally affected by this, and so I think it's good to be transparent about that. And we had talked
Absolutely.
before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that we were talking about the language changes and stuff like that, and you told me something that I thought was really profound. I thought it was kind of a very good way of looking at those shifts in language. Essentially you were telling me to that basically you should be checking with the individual, right?
Yeah, more or less. So, as far as a lot of those different terms, as autism awareness, autism acceptance, as you said, person with autism, autistic individual, and those kind of different debates that you can find a lot of varying viewpoints on. At least in my experience interacting with folks, who were of an age to have an opinion, and even some, younger kids who can form opinions as well. Again, themselves. I'm not saying just adults here.
Right.
But, I see very much what you say, out there. I've had some individuals that are on the spectrum that very much believe it should be an autistic person. I've had other individuals that say, it's a person with autism. I've had other individuals say, I don't really care. My
Right.
name is Bob. It's a matter of, like you said, meeting that individual where they're at and finding out, what are their preferences, and keeping those in mind when you're interacting with them, just like anybody else that you interact with in your day-to-day life. I think it's a good approach for life, not just for interacting with people on the spectrum. It's a good approach for interacting with people in today's world.
Absolutely. I love that. And, I wanted to make sure that we touched on that, because that's such a good message, just in general, like you said, specific to this topic and this community. But yeah, absolutely. It applies to just about everything.
It does.
Gosh,
be good
respecting people, right?
What a thought. Would have thought.
Yeah, right? Such a novel idea. So, I wanted to, again, like the main focus of what we do, and the main focus of what, we kind of want to have people get out of this is, what can we do? How can I make some even small changes in my life to, to be more accepting, uh, make the community more easily accessible, or change attitudes, including, our own. Uh, what are some actionable things that we can do? So, a lot of people, they had a lot of kind of personal questions as far as like, what things can I do to be more accepting of, the autistic community, or, people with various neurodiversity. Um, so, we got questions about like, if I invite an autistic child to my kid's birthday party, what can I do to make it easier? Or, if I have a coworker with autism, should I change certain things that I do? And so, like, a lot of people I think it's coming from a very positive place, like a concerned place that I want to do the best that I can to make it, not something that is not a disability, and not to be, I guess, ableist about it. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that in
I mean,
general, or?
it kind of goes back to what we were just saying. It's being open, have an open mind, and it's tough, because you hear those kind of questions asked, and you kind of want to say, well, you know, keep volumes of things lower sometimes. A lot of folks that are on the spectrum are more susceptible to sounds and loud noises and things. So it's a matter of like when you're going out, um, for example, we do a lot of some events with kids out at trampoline parks and things I used to do. And it was one thing where we would go into the facility and ask them to have the music turned down, have it's just to have less sensory input and all.
Sure.
But then that's an example that work for some individuals. But then going back to an earlier point where we said it is a spectrum and that works for some, but that's something that maybe is not a big thing for others. So it's really a matter of interacting with people, having an open mind, realizing that not everyone is going to respond to things in what you may call a normal way, and that's okay. But it's learning to accept those differences, in that person. Whether it be that they happen to have the atypical, or not atypical, but the typical kind of bit of autism that you hear a lot about, the hand flapping and all. I know some folks are. That's another kind of one of those linchpin topics of whether that should be out there or not. And it's a matter of, if it's out there and someone does it, accept it. Don't look at them funny. Don't kind of make any motions at, or call it out or anything. And maybe discuss it with them at some point when
Right.
you're able to. And again, but not everybody is open to having those questions asked. So again, it's taking that individual to the point, because I don't want to say just go up and ask a bunch of questions to folks, because some folks are again having some of that social anxiety, have some of that shyness,
Right.
and don't want to do it. So it's a matter of, again, meeting them where they're at. It's the one of the biggest things when we're interviewing for folks here with our company is we really stress the fact that hey, you have to be able to shift gears in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
You might work with two different 3-year-olds, and both of them have a kind of communication goal that we're working on, and our approach to that can be very different depending on each of those kids. And you might work with those kids back to back, so it's a matter of, you have to switch gears very quickly. You have to be adaptable, and you have to be willing to again, keep things in mind and think of others, and making sure that we're being respectful in our responses and things.
Yeah.
I think,
No,
which
that's
again
excellent.
is going back to good people, good living, and all, but it applies everywhere, and it's not that it's any different here just because a person's on the spectrum, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to put it. Is you're trying to match what that person is comfortable with, and so maybe somebody is very open to answering questions, and
Mm-hmm.
wants people to come up and ask, but somebody else might not. And if
Yeah.
that's the case, you should respect that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And just kind of have that open frame of mind, because, I see, I hear parents talk about, like, hey, they're afraid to, they're ashamed to take their kid out to a store because the child, maybe has tantrums or exhibits some odd behavior. And it's a matter of, then people reacting to that in public. And it's a matter of, if you, you see things again, react appropriately. If you don't be that guy, right?
Don't be that guy. Yeah.
Don't be that
Yeah.
guy.
And I think like it doesn't mean that you have to ignore these things that happen, in some of the, characteristics of, autism, it can be seen as strengths too, and you see a
Absolutely.
lot of stuff about how incredibly intelligent, some people on the spectrum are, or how focused they can be on particular tasks or, ideas and just all kinds of strength-based things. And it's not necessarily, and I think that's where a lot of the literature is coming from too, is it's not necessarily something to be ashamed of. It's challenging that notion of what is normal and saying that this is just a different version of this great thing we call a human being. And like that being something to celebrate. So, I mean, I really like what you're saying there. I think that, again, it does come back to don't be that guy, try and match the person where they're at and, be respectful. It really does. It seems like that's a simple answer, but, and we want to recognize too that I think for a lot of people who maybe don't know, that can be challenging and that could be something that catches you off guard. But educating yourself and, learning more about it, I think is a fantastic way to kind of handle situations that are new to you. So, I mean, and we actually, one of the other questions we got is, how do I explain this kind of thinking, this idea of inclusivity and accepting, kind of creating an accepting atmosphere? How do I explain that to kids, or how do I explain that to, maybe a family member who doesn't get it, or, a friend or a coworker who maybe doesn't have that open mind? I know that I personally, I'm always looking for strategies on how to educate my children on that, any kind of inclusivity. But do you have any thoughts on like things that have been beneficial, maybe like in your experience, or just any thoughts in general about that?
I've seen some programming where, we're doing some, sibling interaction and peer interactions. And in all of those instances, it's a matter of, sitting the siblings down, sitting the peers down and letting them know what to expect, in those situations. And, in a broader sense, it's a matter of don't expect anything. It's a matter of it's a crazy world out there. You can see anything at any point in time, potentially. And so be ready for anything and just be accepting to know that things aren't ever going to go exactly the way that your mind thinks that they will go. Any interaction with a person is never going to be the way that you think it should go yourself. And so it's kind of broadening that initial mindset into a state of everyone's different. You're going to come into difference everywhere in all different forms and varieties. And so just being ready for that. Now, again, that's easier to kind of do in the situations I was mentioning earlier where we're doing peer things, because that's, again, we know exactly kind of what some of those behaviors are that we're going to see in those instances. But, again, coming back to the fact that it's the spectrum, it's hard to say, be able to say, be prepared without saying be prepared for anything.
Right.
So be prepared for anything,
Right.
I guess. Yeah.
And I know, like, from my end, as a parent, it's been nice to see in media that there's a certain, like, vocal and, like, it's not trying to sweep something under the rug. And, like, I even remember watching an episode of a PBS show where there was an autistic character on there. And, my son leans over to me and goes, "I like him. He has a nice smile." And I'm like, all right.
Exactly.
I think we're doing something okay here, because it wasn't a focus on the behaviors. It wasn't a focus on like, something is different here. It was completely a focus on like, I like his smile, and that was a very heartwarming moment for me. And you even see comedians and just people in media in general talking about this, books, movies, TV shows. It's not something that people are shying away from talking about, and I think that really speaks to maybe an openness in society that I'd like to hope is there. But yeah, I think that it really does come down to that, being prepared to challenge your old way of thinking, and not anticipating a specific kind of reaction or a specific set of like cues from people. So yeah, don't necessarily go in with like this pre-existing idea of what is normal or what is typical, or any of that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's nice to see when that's done right, I guess. When
Yeah,
it's
I mean, and it's hard, and it's a lot of hard conversations that you're going to have in the process potentially.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of different ways that you can look at things. Obviously, as we were talking earlier, some of the different viewpoints that are in a couple topics in this realm. But it's yeah, I mean, in the end, we're all going to be better, not just as individuals, but as a whole, as society, out there. But and that's kind of my bigger kind of bit for people. It's kind of that question you had earlier of, what can we do now? What can I do?
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, depends on where you're at, but do something. So if you have a suspicion, ask the questions. If you feel that, somebody that a loved one potentially is on the spectrum, encourage talking to your doctor, talking to your pediatrician, getting a diagnosis, figuring it out. And, then you'll at least have an answer to know whether that is that or not. And then you can kind of go along. If you're having issues where you have a diagnosis and you're looking to access resources, get involved with, your state or national advocacy, talk to your state representatives. A lot of the different laws and things that are out there are set at the state level. So get involved locally, reach out to your congresspeople, advocate for things that are missing to help those that you love lead better lives in whatever way, shape, or form you feel is best. Again, I can't tell you A, B, and C because I don't know each person that may potentially be watching this and where they are or what is most impactful to them. But it's a matter of doing something. Whatever that next step is, take it and go and be better people and help yourselves and like I said, your loved ones be better folks as well.
So if you had to summarize, like, what is one thing that you would hope that somebody would get out of this conversation we've had today?
It's just that, whatever your personal journey is, whether you're brand new to this, whether you just found out that somebody that you love is on the spectrum, if you yourself are on the spectrum, if you suspect, again, it's a matter of do that next step, ask the questions. I mean, like your doctors are a great place to start. If you don't know where to start, talk to your doctor, and they can guide you in the right direction. From there, give you some resources. There's a lot of places online that have a lot of great resources. Autism Speaks has a lot of good stuff out there if you're newly diagnosed family trying to figure out next steps and best paths for you. I know Autism Speaks isn't necessarily the most popular with organization that's out there. Again, depending on who you talk to, people have very strong opinions each way there. But each state has local autism resources. The Autism Society of whatever your state is usually is the name of the website. Like we've had the Autism Society of Oregon or Autism Society of Hawaii in the places I've lived, Autism Society of California. And they have a lot of great resources for families there as well. So, I mean, reach out. I mean, even if that is what your next step is just doing some research on the web and seeing where else that takes you, then do it. And again, help yourself, help others get to where they want to be. And if you're already there, then congratulations. And I'm glad you are. And help educate others then along the way to get them to where they need to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jim, for, taking the time to kind of talk about this. And, I really appreciate you kind of giving some insight into, this community and kind of the experiences that people have, and kind of giving some advice on like what people can do to be more accepting. So, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
No worries. Thank you for having this, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
You're welcome. Again, if you would like more resources, please, as Jim said, there are plenty of resources out there, vetted things that are of high quality. Look to the community themselves, like what are these, he said there's some controversial things out there, but there's also some really good stuff. So if you ever have questions, reach out to the Real Action Community Engagement Committee. We, pride ourselves on vetting our resources very well. And if we don't know, we will certainly look for who would. But again, Jim, thank you for being here today, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for all the great work you guys are doing out there. I'm really excited to see where race goes.
Hopefully in good places, but thank you.